it's now time to begin the show. Thank you all for coming tonight to a virtual presentation on one of the artists, Italian artists, who worked on St. Leonard's Church in the North End of Boston. His name was Donatus Buongiorno. He was a native of Italy, of Solofra, in the province of Avellino. And he immigrated to the US, and a decade or so after his passage, he was commissioned by the Franciscan friars of St. Leonard's Church to do a really ambitious decorative program, organic in the sense of, in many different areas of the church. He and some of his colleagues we'll hear about tonight worked to create a really elaborate interior, much of which you can really still see today. And this is one of our tasks tonight, is to go through archival photography and other information, not all of it published, but Janice is working on that. And we will, hopefully as parishioners, as guests, as fans of the 150th celebration of this church and parish, we'll be able to recognize and appreciate Buongiorno's work. So I want to thank you for registering tonight. We're looking forward to hearing from genealogist and historian, especially about the Italian-American experience, Janice Carapilucci of Brooklyn, New York. Janice has a very close connection. She has been professionally as well as personally to Buongiorno. She, as with her research skills, has tracked down a lot of information about him, but she has also this special, I wouldn't say advantage, but special motivation to do this, because he is her, and I think I have this right, Janice, her great-grandmother's older brother. Is that right?
Okay. Younger brother, but you were close.
Oh, younger brother. Okay.
Yep. 10 years younger than her.
10 years younger. Wow.
Yeah.
And he was trained in the. You'll tell us more about where he was trained.
Yes,
and
I will give
some of his early work. So I won't get into that. But it's really exciting.
Before you turn it over to me, though, Jessica, introduce yourself. You neglected to do that.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Because I'm actually being listed as Claudia Carroll. I'm not Claudia. Claudia is with us, very much present, but I am using her Zoom Pro tonight. My name's Jessica Della Russo. I'm a PhD in archaeology, which I received from the Vatican in 2022. On Christian archaeology, study of ancient churches. So for me, it's really a thrill to kind of unpack the archaeology, if you will, the history of a modern parish. This is not a ruin. This is still a very vibrant, even growing organization. I know this is a luxury for me.
There are records, right?
There are written records, exactly. Yeah. And we're not going to have this a ruin. So I am absolutely determined that I will never have to study this wonderful church, which was the first Italian national or ethnic parish in New England. And we're celebrating again 150 years since its formation in 1873. So thank you all. And Janice, I would love if you could delve right into the stuff, because we want to have time for questions.
Yeah, you bet. And by the way, I can only see about 3 or 4 faces at a time on my screen. I see, sorry, Chip. Is that Chip Valerian? Oh, fantastic. Okay, we're going to go to Solofra, Chip. You hang in there. There's an amazing assortment of people on this list tonight, and I hope I'm going to hit all of the interests of all of you. And we'll leave time for questions both at the end, but also if you want to shoot them out, honestly, I don't find that distracting. If anybody wants to shoot out a question while I'm talking, feel free, because sometimes it's more productive to do it when the subject is on the screen, and I'm game for that. I'm also really eager to connect with people later. I think you all got my handout today, right? I hope. We'll get it to you later if you don't have it already. That has all kinds of contact information from me, and it'll be at the end. Okay, let me get started. This man, Donatus Buongiorno. Oh my God, there's a story already right there. His given name was Donato. And I have learned over the years, as soon as you talk to an Italian, they know that and they just ignore that US thing on the end, which I think was his attempt to be kind of unique in the United States. He used the Latin version of his name in his business dealings in the US. So I try to honor that by calling him that here. But basically, he was a mural artist, and he did 4 commissions for churches in Boston, and I'm going to show those all to you tonight. The biggest one and the first one is St. Leonard's. So let me just keep going. Yeah. Quickly, who am I? You just heard the intro. That's Jessica just said all those things. This guy was a relative of mine. I'm going to show you how I got interested, how I first heard about him and how I got curious about him. Let me tell you a little more about him. He was born in a town called Solofra, which is in Avellino, which is in, I forget what they call it, the region of Campania, Italy, which is basically the area around the city of Naples. His little town, still not so little, but kind of little, is about an hour's drive east of Naples. And he left that town in the 1880s to attend the Art Academy in Naples, Italy. And then he left Naples in 1892 to come to the US, and he came to New York City. And he died near Naples back in Italy in 1935. I know a few facts about him from some things that my grandfather wrote, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But when I got started, I wondered, who was this guy? Was he famous outside my family? Would I be able to find anything about him? And oh my Lord, I was amazed what I could find. The quick version is I discovered that he was an academy educated professional, kind of unique in the 1880s. I think that's kind of like graduating from an art college today. And he had a well-paying technical skill. He was an early Italian trailblazer to the US, having come to New York 15 years before Italian migration to the US peaked in 1907. And he was the first of my Italian-born family members to migrate to the US. He was also, and I'm going to harp on this later, an economically successful entrepreneur who supported many family members who followed him. Here's how he's specifically related to me. He's in the upper left on this slide. Can you guys see when I do this with my cursor? Jessica, can you see my cursor moving around the face of him?
I do.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So I can use this as a pointer. Terrific. So that's him on the upper left. The woman in the middle of those top 3 is his sister, whose name was Maria Michela Buongiorno. She married a man named Beniamino Troisi, which they pronounced Troisi in the US. I won't get into a lecture on, how Italian Americans, we don't even know how to pronounce our own names. That aside, this couple produced several children, including this man down here who was my grandfather. To the right of him is his daughter, who was my mother, and then to the right of that is me. So I call him my great grand uncle. I'm not sure if that's really the right title, genealogically, but it works for us. Okay, a little bit more about my grandfather, Dominic Troisi, who is the man up here in this group of 4. So those are the 4 men who migrated to the US in 1907. Him, his father, and his 2 brothers. They lived in New York City. He worked in the garment industry. He took a job in 1917 in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is a town in the center of Pennsylvania. He moved there and he never left. He married a local woman there. There they are, my grandfather and his wife, in 1920. They had 10 children, upper right, and those 10 children had 42 grandchildren, of whom I am one. So as you can see, this story continues, and we got a lot of involved parties. And here we are 50 years later, we still have family reunions. I don't know how many we have now, but we're working on it. Okay. So how did I research them? I'm also going to talk about this a little bit tonight. I'm going to tie everything back into St. Leonard's and the other 3 Boston church commissions, but there are going to be some tangents here because I know some people are curious about, how do you research somebody? What can you find? And what's on those documents? And Jessica will get very excited because Jessica, you're now going to see how damn easy it is for us who are looking for things that are only 100 years old and they're on paper. Okay. So we've got documents, and let me show you some. And by the way, this is my pitch. For any of you who haven't joined me yet, I'm hoping I can seduce a few of you tonight. This is really fun to research something like this. And you can pick any tiny little avenue that you're curious about, and you're just amazed at what you can find. So watch for ideas tonight. And especially the people who are parishioners of these 4 churches in Boston, because you guys know your churches better than I do. And please watch tonight with an eye for either holes in the story that you can fill in for us, or clues to something that you might have, like documents your family might have in a box somewhere that will answer some of these questions. And my challenge to everybody is, let's all start working now, and 25 years from now, we're going to have more stuff to put into the 175th anniversary book that we all do together, right? Okay, so here's a category: personal family records and publications. Oh my gosh, boy, did I have a gold mine. My grandfather, God bless him, when he was 76 years old, 50th wedding anniversary, he wrote a memoir, which he self-published for the family. And by the way, this is back in the days with, typed manuscripts, and you had to pay somebody to typeset it, and then you had to pay somebody else to print it. God bless him. He did all that, and we all have these books. And that's where I started. I went back to his memoir and I read it again about 15 years ago, which is when I started this project. We were doing it ostensibly on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of his arrival in the US, which was 2007. But what happened to me was I already knew most of his story because, he wrote it down and told us. But in the book, I started reading about his uncle. And I thought, who was this guy? Here I am living in New York for more than 30 years. I wonder if I can find out anything about this guy. So I'm going to read you 2 excerpts here. These are from his book. Uncle Donato had his studio on 788 Broadway. Okay, you find addresses, you Google them, you start looking them up. It was a small office building next to Trinity Church. That was correct, by the way. The building is long gone, but I figured out what it was. He lived with his wife and his son, blah, 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 in a 4-room apartment. Quickly in pink there, that note, lifelong friend Sonino, just file that away. I'm going to come back to it in about 20 slides. But here's what I love about this. They had a 4-room apartment adjoining ours. And by combining the kitchen and living area, we had ample bedrooms for all of us. This was almost luxury for us. Can I point out to anybody who happens to know New York City housing, he is describing 2 adjoining railroad flat apartments in a tenement building, not luxurious housing, even at this time, that were probably only had cold water running inside, and probably had, in 1907, even that late, probably still had an outhouse in the backyard. The message here, by the way, is what he left in Italy. And P.S., it's a side story. I won't go into it, but a group of us cousins went to Italy 5 years ago. And we figured out where he lived, and we went and saw the apartment, and it was bad. So this really was almost luxurious for them. Okay, my second excerpt here is about something that happened to them. They were held overnight at Ellis Island. Okay, here's what Dominic says. Because father was over age and 3 of us too young to earn a living, we were detained at Ellis Island until our guarantor, Uncle Donato, could come in person and sign bonds, assuring 1907 already we were doing this to immigrants. You couldn't get in unless you had some money in your wallet. But here's the part I love about this. We enjoyed our stay at Ellis Island. Have you ever, any of you heard of a migrant say that in this period? The food was good, and we had meat every day and even butter on our bread, which was a luxury we had never enjoyed before. Listen, if you guys don't know Italian migration yet, the biggest part of the story is people were hungry. They were all hungry. That's why they came here. Can you imagine? Meat every day was a luxury. We spent about 3 days. He's wrong. They were only there one night. But my point here is, he had no complaints, and he even praised the accommodations. Okay, how do I know that? I'm going to show you, because you can do this research on anybody you know or want to know. This is a sample genealogy tool, a manifest. What's a manifest? It's a list. It's a list of names. And the US keeps lists, still today, of every single person that crosses over into US soil by whatever method. You're going to see one from 1907. This is the list. This is one list from probably about 100 pages for this ship that they sailed on from Naples to New York. They are the 4 names that are circled there in pink. Oh, by the way, I love to tell people this. Every time you get off an airplane and your passport gets scanned at an international airport in the US, guess what? Your name goes onto one of these lists. And 100 years from now, other people are going to be able to read it. They will eventually become publicly available. Just FYI. Anyway, here are the 4 of them. What are the details that are on this thing that are relevant when you're researching somebody? There's an enlargement of the 4 names and their ages. And P.S., by the way, remember the note about father was too old to work? Excuse me, 57, too old? Don't we all wish? Best thing on this is on the right, and I'm reading now down here, it says, whether going to join a relative or friend, and if so, what relative or friend, and his name and complete address. And there we have Donato Buongiorno, 306 East 12th Street, New York. So here's another hint. If you didn't know his address before, you know it now. Bingo. And by the way, that's a renovated tenement building, just as I predicted, that is still standing. Okay, so let me back up a little though. Before you get into genealogy documents, where do you start? You start where we all start. To research an artist, or for that matter, anybody, we all go to Google, right? Here's what you find for artists on Google. You find paintings, if they had them or if they've been sold. Excuse me. And you find websites that have auction results. So if any of you know the names of the painters who worked in your churches, this will lead you to more information about them. And FYI, we're going to see churches in a minute, but before we get to that, here's just an assortment of the other kinds of paintings he did, which are all smaller. They're called easel paintings because they're usually small enough that one person can handle them. And as you can see, his thing was, this category is called genre paintings. They were genre paintings of primarily Italian people. They're almost always Italian looking, and perhaps people you know. Okay, next thing you do is you hit libraries. I've got a fabulous one in New York. The 2 pictures on the left are the New York Public Library. They have a dedicated art collection with also fabulous librarians who have been helping me now for 15 years. By the way, you guys in Boston, you have an equally fabulous library. If you don't already know about it, go check it out. This is the Boston Public Library. And while you're there, check out the murals. These are world famous murals, by the way, by an Italian-born American painter, John Singer Sargent, who was a contemporary of Donatus, Buongiorno. And that could be another whole slideshow. One of the things I've been trying to prove for years, I'm like this close, is whether or not they met each other in Boston, because they were both working there at the same time. And because Sargent was installing these murals in this library in the 1920s. And I can promise you, my guy Buongiorno, he was a Handler, to use one of my favorite Yiddish words. If he had a way to meet this guy, I promise you he would have. He may have shown up at the library and introduced himself, for all I know. He didn't leave a record of it that I've found yet, but I'm working on it. And if maybe some of you Boston people might fill that one in. But it's a side story. Okay, back to being an artist. What do you find? When you go to the library, you're going to find a bunch of reference books that have lists of artists and details about their careers. These are 3 that are widely available. If you know this world, you know these titles. My favorite is the one on the left by Florence N. Levy, who published for about 30 years something called the American Art Annual. And then she sold it to guess who? The Marquee Publishing Company. It is now called Who's Who in American Art. Go Florence is what I say. Let me quickly go through. This is like a list of commissions. They're in order because I've got these for about 25 years. He got himself listed every time the book was published, and he just added to the end of the list. And so the ones in pink are the ones I'm going to show tonight. The first one, and boy, that is relevant because it's a big commission, is St. Leonard in Boston. And then he made a little trip to Brattleboro, Vermont, and then he came back to Boston, did another one, Holy Trinity. Then he's got a bunch in New York and elsewhere. And then the last one here is back to Boston, which is St. Lazarus in East Boston. So let me keep going. What do you do with churches? Oh man, Catholic churches. One of the first things you do is, if you can, you identify the order of priests who ran the church. And that can mean they were the ones who assembled the first parish and got it and did the legal paperwork that got it established in its state. And everything after that, including hiring an architect and building a building, if that was done. Sometimes parishes bought an existing building. The 2 big names to look out for, I'm going to explain what order of priests means for those who don't know, but the 2 big ones to watch out for are called Franciscans and Scalabrinians. And by that, I mean the 2 big ones for Italians in the US. Okay, who were they? Franciscans, we all know about St. Francis of Assisi, right? This is an order of priests that are descended from Francis and his time. Here are 3 paintings by famous painters. I think they might even all be Italian. One might be Spanish. Of some famous Franciscans, if not St. Francis. Point being to show you, when you're looking for paintings of Franciscans, they will have these hallmarks. The biggest one, of course, is the brown robes. They still wear them to this day. As you can see by the group of them down below, the group of contemporary Franciscan priests who are standing with the current Pope, who named himself Francis. Woo. Okay, the other big group has 2 different names. I called them Scalabrinians before. That is correct. It's because they are named for the priest who organized the group, whose name was Giovanni Battista Scalabrini. He was the Bishop of Piacenza in Italy, and they were organized in 1887. And if you know Catholic history, that means like yesterday. You know, this is a very recently established order. And their patron saint is Charles Borromeo, who is the guy in the 4 paintings. So Charles was an Archbishop of Milan in the 1500s, which means he was also a cardinal, which is why you see the red robes. So that's how you recognize paintings of Charles, called Carlo, of course, in Italian, And you will find that in their churches, there's almost always a painting of the patron saint, and sometimes that's the name of the church. It's a common name for churches in the US. Let me continue. I might go back to that, but let me continue. Okay, so when Buongiorno had a mural, how did he work out the subject matter of his murals? According to his assignments, the simple answer is he worked with the priest. Whichever priest hired him, he worked with that priest to figure out what the paintings would be. This is a really simple one, and that's why I threw it in. This is another church in New York that I'm not going to talk about other than this one slide. It's called Our Lady of Peace. The painting was done in 1919, 1920. Hello, that explains the name of the church. Obviously, it's the peace after World War I. And the paint in the lower left, this is Buongiorno's painting. And over here on the right, hello, that's what he worked from. This was an image of Our Lady of Peace that was circulated, I think, around the world, at least in Italy that I know of, although you can see it's in Italian with an English subhead. So maybe in the US too, of an image of Our Lady of Peace to try to, settle World War I and have some peace. So here's a really direct example. Most of them are not going to be that direct. But again, I would like to appeal to my audience tonight. Look through your own family papers. You might find something that he worked from that will help us explain some of the murals in St. Leonard's and the other churches in Boston. Okay, now, oh boy, bear with me, 2 more kind of tedious slides, and then we're going to see some pictures of paintings. This is complete list of all the murals he did. That is basically me typing out and expanding on that little version that you saw a couple minutes ago done by Florence Levy in her book. And the main thing here is we've got 3 different cities only: Boston, New York, and Brattleboro, Vermont. One would wonder, how did he get that commission? The answer, by the way, is follow the priests. If you're trying to figure out how he got his, I won't go into this a whole lot tonight, but you follow the priests, because the priests networked among each other. Priests today even keep in touch with the men that they went to seminary with for the rest of their lives. That's like their first networking group, and then they expand it based on where they work. And I've got an example of that coming up. But anyway, watch now. I'm going to take these 8 commissions and cut them down to the 6 that I'm going to show you tonight, which are in Boston and New York. And in fact, you already saw one. You just saw Our Lady of Peace. This is my example of follow the priests. On the left is a list of pastors at St. Leonard's, which was provided to me a couple weeks ago by Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. On the right is a list of pastors. It's a partial list that's in a publication of the church that I'm involved in New York, which is Most Precious Blood, that was done by a priest in 1960. Thank you, Father, for writing up the history up to 1960. And look what we got here. We got 2 people who are repeating: Atanasio Butelli and Romano Simoni. In fact, let's look at Father Simoni. He's the best example. I'm not sure about Butelli. I haven't followed that one yet. In fact, Jessica, we need to talk later if you know who he is. Or if somebody chimes in and tells you later, I know about him. But Simoni's a perfect example, because look, he was at, let me get this straight. He was in New York from, I'm looking over here, 1909 to 1917. And hello, Buongiorno painted murals there from 1914 to 1917. So that tells us Simoni is the one who hired Buongiorno. That could be very, very useful information in certain contexts. And then in 1917, he went to Boston for a year or 2 years. And then there's a gap where he probably went somewhere else, if we knew his career. And in 1923, he comes back for 5 years in Boston. So if we have any descendants, by the way, of relatives of Simoni, please check in with us. This is one thing I've learned in New York. We've got a man who's active in our parish who is a descendant of a brother of 3 or 4 of these people who worked at Most Precious Blood. This one, Archese, Julius Archese. And we've learned a lot about him from this descendant 100 years later. So these things loop around and come around, and you never know who's going to know something useful. Okay, let's move on to St. Leonard's. 2 photos. You all know these photos very well. The one at the top is the best we've got for the dating on that so far is that it's before 1925. The one below is 2016. And you can tell, like, just even at a glance, first of all, we have a giant painting up here in this, oh, Jessica, help me, I'm losing my vocabulary. What's the word for that architectural?
The Assumption of the Virgin.
Yeah, and it's in a place that in 1925 didn't have a painting. Okay, so, basic knowledge, that one was done later. Clearly not Buongiorno's, because P.S., remember, he died in 1935. Okay, now look at the saints that are over the altar here, and look at them in the painting above, and you can see that the gestures and the position of the figures is different. So those have been repainted since. Not unknown, by the way. You have a church that's 100 years old. You have to keep it up. You have to clean it. You have maintenance issues. God forbid the roof leaks, because that'll ruin paintings. And also remember, decades ago, we had candles burning in all these buildings, throwing soot all over the place. So that's a mess that had to be cleaned up. And often the painting, they either get cleaned or changed a little or completely painted over. Sorry to say, not the end of the, kills me, but it's not the end of the world. And in fact, in this church, okay, now let's look up, this is straight up at the main dome in the center of the church. What's relevant here, besides the fact that, oh my God, that's a gorgeous dome, is see these little triangular shaped paintings on the 4 corners where the dome meets the building. That architectural space is called a pendentive. Thank you, Jessica, for teaching me that. And those 4 murals were probably originally Buongiorno murals, but we know for a fact that these 4 that are there now were done in a 1950s renovation, because this church, hello, has some records, thank God, by a very, very well-known studio called D'Ambrosio, Ecclesiastical Art Studios. It was started by a mural painter in the 1920s, still in business 100 years later. God bless them, members of the family, keeping it going. So when you have that, again, you get some records and you have some institutional history. How about these paintings? Some of these might be Buongiorno paintings, or they might be Buongiorno paintings that have been cleaned, perhaps retouched, perhaps fixed a little by D'Ambrosio and or others over the years. Remember, the title of this, the only thing I had to go by was the title that Buongiorno gave this commission in that list from 1925 that I'm working from the book. And he called it, sorry, I got to reverse to remember, Apotheosis of the Evangelist, singular, not even plural. What does that mean? I mean, we all know who the evangelists were, but hello, just one of them? Were all 4 of these guys evangelists at one time? Are they now? Or did he paint other things? I know from other commissions where I have more records, that often his title in that trade book list was very brief. And in fact, he did like lots of other paintings, including, by the way, decorative stuff. Like these, I'm sorry, I don't even know what they're called. These shapes.
The coffering?
ceiling. Say again?
The coffers.
The coffers. See these coffers in the ceiling? Parts of those are gold leafed. Well, you can see it better down here in this one that's in focus. Some of that's gold leafed and some of it's painted. And he may have specified all of that painting too. for all I know. This we can't figure out unless we find, some purchase orders or contracts. But let's keep going. Or unless one of you has, grandma has a purchase order in her, I don't know, photo album or something. Okay. This one, these two, I know for sure are his, and I'll show you why. Can we please, by the way, oh my God, look at this beautiful church. Beautiful renovation job, all of you who were involved, and also beautiful photo, Matt Conti. Thank you $1 million for letting us use your photos for this slideshow. Circled in pink in the back are 2 murals. Those are under the organ loft next to the prior front door of the church. I know you guys don't use it and haven't used it for decades from what I can tell. You enter from the side now, right? But this is actually the front of the church that faces the main street. And we're now going to look at some enlargements of those paintings. The 2 on the left are the paintings in St. Leonard's. Okay, pop quiz. Gee, who are they paintings of? Hello, Franciscans. See the brown robes? Okay, the one on the top is easily identified. That is a common image of St. Francis's life, which is receiving the stigmata, the marks on his hands. And the one, and by the way, for comparison, I'm going to jump ahead a tiny little bit. See the one over here on the right? Same story from Most Precious Blood in New York, painted 2 years later. So again, another Franciscan-run church. So here we have a perfect example. We have 2 images of St. Francis, the same event from his life. You can tell they're done by the same artist, right? And honestly, the thing I find most indicative when trying to identify his paintings is the color palette. Lots of browns. The one on the right might be, my JPEG might not be so great. It looks a little yellowish to me. Like that brown earth that he's kneeling on might have been a little more bluish, like the mountains over here in this photo of the painting in St. Leonard's. And by the way, please, can I throw in a shout out for your fabulous priest, Father Della Penna. He shot this photo for me. I caught him on the phone one time, answered his own phone in the rectory. This was the beginning of the COVID closings. And I thought, oh, I'll take a chance. And I just called one day. And he answered his own phone, and I explained who I was and what I was doing. And I was interested in these paintings. And he says, sure. He says, I'm going down to say mass in about an hour. I'll shoot a photo for you. And he shot it back to me like 2 hours later. Thank you, Father. But anyway, what was I saying? Okay, so the brown colors and the blues that he used in backgrounds and skies often are similar. And even in this case, the gold leafed wooden frame around the painting is something he did in other churches. So I can tell you for sure he did those 2 paintings, if none others in the church. But by the way, neither of them are evangelists, right? So that means there's at least one other painting somewhere in that church that says, and by the way, I think there are a lot more. Okay, this is one of 2 slides. The painting in the upper left here is from St. Leonard's. That's in the narthex, which is the fancy name for that entryway of the formerly main entrance on the street. And in fact, I believe, sticking my neck out here, tell me if I'm wrong, Jessica. If you go to the back of the church, see these glass doors back here? I think they're closed all the time. But if you press your nose against them, I think if you look left and right, you will see, whoops, oh my bad. Hang on, people, I got to go back. Ooh, I really blew it. Hang on.
You're giving us a preview, Janice, but
yeah, hang in there. Okay, if you look left and right.
Yeah, they're in the descending staircases. So, as you pointed out, this was the original entryway into the church. So these would have been really the first paintings you'd see as
very prominent, right?
And the subject matter, as you're going to say, is probably suggestive of that fact.
Well, here's the thing about the subject matter. This boy, oh boy, is this interesting. Okay, so the painting in the top left is the one in St. Leonard's, and obviously that's a Franciscan, right, with the brown robes? Okay. Below it, we have a very, very similar painting in Most Precious Blood in New York City. Again, Francis, and he's blessing three people. And we've been puzzling over this one for years in New York because we were pretty convinced the guy in the foreground was Columbus. And we're like, whoa, were these guys getting into like the whole, Columbus thing back then? And what can we do with that now, by the way, to promote the church? We're planning to use it in New York. We haven't figured out yet how we're going to join the fray, but one of these years we will. Then I found, look at this ad on the right. If you study Catholics or Catholic churches, or honestly anything Catholic in the US, you will discover a publication called the Kennedy Official Catholic Directory. They've been, still are in business, have been since I think the 1860s. It's a business that, it's a directory that sells stuff to priests, to put it simply. Like if a priest needs to buy, oh gosh, all of my pews are, falling apart. I need to buy new pews for the whole church. Where the hell do you find them? You go in the Kennedy directory and you'll find 10 ads for companies that sell pews and lights and stained glass windows and every possible thing you can ever need in a Catholic church. And by the way, it's also a directory. There's some editorial. They provide lists of Catholic churches all around the world. It's an incredible research resource now. And you find them, by the way, in archives all over the place. Like every archdiocese has an archive of these, 150 years worth, possibly, likely. And when oh, and also, by the way, Google Books. Every now and then you find something that I swear, this is the only explanation I could come up with. Some magazine gets bound by an archivist 100 years ago in a leather cover, to preserve it, the way libraries used to do. And guess what? Now it qualifies as a book. And Google Books comes along and scans all this stuff and posts it online. Okay, I found this one on Google Books. And boy, doesn't that explain everything? There we go. In 1913, Buongiorno buys an ad for himself in Kennedy Directory in order to advertise to other priests, hey, I'm a guy who can paint murals in your church. Here's an example of one that I just did in Boston. Note, by the way, and he explains, he puts a title on it. So he settled the argument we kept having in New York. By the way, we knew Francis, we figured out Dante, and we figured out Columbus. We could not figure out who the woman with the blue, fabric on her head was. Guess what? Wrong, not a woman. This is St. Francis blessing art and science in Dante, Giotto, an Italian painter. Oops, sorry. And Columbus. And look at that note in pink, by the way, all you St. Leonard's people. 21 paintings in St. Leonard's Church. There's our answer. Let's start a list. We're going to figure out which 21 were his. I think I know 3 or 4 so far. You're going to see them tonight, but we're going to make this add up to 21. Okay, let me continue. Here's the painting that's on the other side of that narthex. The other, what did you call it, Jessica? The stairwell from the street? Yeah.
Yes, they're at a slightly lower level than the than the entryway itself.
Oh, okay, got it. So this other painting, obviously, we've got a Franciscan there, 2 Franciscans, and they're handing out bread. Hello, you guys know the story of St. Anthony, right? St. Anthony giving bread to the poor. I have a new point for you here. The picture on the right is my enlargement of those 3 characters from this story. Anybody recognize anybody? Grandma, grandpa, A great-granduncle, perhaps? Here's my theory to you. Buongiorno may have used local people as the models for parishioners, as the models for the non-clerical people in the paintings. So I want you all now to go start running around your church and looking at all the paintings and see if you recognize any of your relatives. We might be able to figure out something about one of these paintings that way. Okay, continuing. Oh my God. Another gorgeous photo by Matt. Thank you, Matt. Look at that church. Oh, you guys have a beautiful church. And you recognize, by the way, here's one of those murals we just looked at, right? That's Francis receiving the stigmata. Look what we have up here. See my pink circle? I think what we've got up here is another Buongiorno painting. And there are two, by the way, because of course this is only half of the church. On the left is another group of arches with a flat wall in front of it like that, that has another painting. And I'm going to show you both of them because Jessica photographed them for me. Thank you, Jessica. What we have here are homages to the Franciscans who started and ran and I believe continue to run. Is it still Franciscans running
Yes,
the church now?
the province of the Immaculate Conception.
Beautiful. There we go. I'm going to start. I should have put these the other way. I'm going to start with the one on the right. This one, as soon as you start looking at Franciscan stuff, you're going to know. Here it is enlarged down here. This is the Franciscan order coat of arms. Two arms reaching out and crossing in front of a cross. One of them is bare, and one of them has the sleeve of a brown Franciscan robe. And you will see that now that you know what you're seeing, you will see it everywhere in all kinds of different kinds of art, not just a painting, but in sculptures and prints and all kinds of other stuff. Okay, the one on the left has something that's Boston specific. We have a Latin phrase that translates as that they may know you, plus an archbishop's coat of arms. And again, if you look down here, there's a little detail on it. And by the way, oh my gosh, one of my researchers in New York, who I'm going to do a plug for in a few minutes, pointed out that this tiny little corner of this, see the thing that looks like a cloud sitting over like rolling waves? That is a reference to the Puritan reference of Boston as city on a hill. So we got a few things going on here. But the main thing going on is that the coat of arms is of Richard James Cushing, who was appointed in 1944 and was himself a third order Franciscan before ordination, and who always thanked the Franciscans for his earliest religious guidance. And what the main thing it tells me, as far as our history goes, it's not Buongiorno's painting because he was dead by 1935. So somebody else either painted or adjusted this coat of arms to make it match, the 44 version. Again, it's how you put all these pieces together. Okay, little side note. Oh my gosh. See the thing circled in pink at the top? Remember my grandfather's reference to the lifelong friend Sannino? Okay, well, I figured out that my grandfather spelled his name wrong. It was Sannino. And look what I found in the Kennedy directory, an ad for Sannino with claims that he did the interior woodwork of this church. Really? That was news to me. I would love to be able to confirm this, by the way, with you guys in Boston, because come on, that is a stunning amount of work. Does it mean he literally did it all with his own two hands, or did he design it and then manage a crew? I don't know what it means, but it was also stunning to me. I knew him as a guy that worked in furniture factories in New York, and I've confirmed using US censuses, which you can also get at ancestry.com. I have found him in every single census from when he arrived, which was late 1890s, to he died in New York in 1946. Every single one, he's both working, even 1930 census. He has a full-time job and he's working in a cabinet making factory somewhere in New York City. They actually had them in New York City. I was shocked to learn myself. I had no idea that he ever did anything this substantial. I still need to figure out how to document it. But look, 5 World's Fairs, gold medals in 5 World's Fairs. That's researchable. I haven't done it yet. But let's take a minute to pause here and enjoy his gorgeous work in your beautiful church. Look at all that woodwork. Honestly, I find it stunning, just stunning. Whew. And in beautiful condition. You guys did a great job. Okay, other churches in Boston. I'm going to buzz through these pretty quickly because we're almost at the hour. Sacred Heart, we all, you Bostonians know it's right down the street, like by New York standards, not even a block away, in North Square. The name of the mural there from Buongiorno's directory is St. Charles Borromeo. I already explained to you that's the patron saint of the Scalabrinians, so that tells you this is a Scalabrinian-run church, or was in 1913. This one I need help on. If somebody knows about this church or can help me or would be willing to go in and shoot some photos for me, I'd appreciate it. I've got this old photo from a 1913 Scalabrinian book that a researcher in New York found for me. I'm going to tell you about her in a minute. It looks like a low ceiling. I'm sort of suspecting, is that a basement chapel, perhaps? Because I also have this photo that she found, which looks like it's more likely upstairs, obviously higher ceiling, circa 1960. So does it still have any Buongiorno paintings in it? Who knows, unlikely. These that I can see here look like a group of angels. They do not look like his style at all. So I'm going to guess no. But look what I also have. And now I'm going to give my plug for Mary Brown, who is an archivist for a Scalabrinian archive that is in New York City. If you guys have questions, you need to meet her. And you can call her or email her. She'll help you, by phone. She'll look for stuff for you in her group's records if they have them, and she'll know whether or not they have them. She found these for me years ago. In Italian, we have records of the minutes of the San Marco Society, who, those of you who know these churches know that that was the group of lay people that set up this parish. These are from 1913. These are records of that fact that they hired the painter Buongiorno. And look at this. Oh, this is like a gold mine. What he was paid, $510 for all the restorations done to the church. Now, again, what exactly did he do? I'm not sure. I don't know. How much is $510 in 1913? A hell of a lot of money. So he might have done a lot. Still working on that one, and I hope some of you can help me. Next one, Church of St. Peter. It's in South Boston. The title was the Holy Trinity, and the date on it is 1916, 1917. Another wonderful priest who ran and shot a photo for me almost on demand. It's Father Zukas. I don't know if he's still there. This was like 15 years ago. That's clearly an image. We all know Holy Trinity, right? The 2 figures and then a dove with the big, or sometimes, what's the other thing? It can be something other than a dove. It looks like, to me, it looks like Buongiorno's kind of layout, but it does not look like his painting at all, especially the pastel colors. And bad news, this church had a major fire in 1923. It was at the altar, which is right below this painting. My suspicion is this painting was damaged and then repainted. If anybody knows more, please get in touch with me. Here's the last one I've got, St. Lazarus, East Boston. This one, again, is a bit of a puzzle. That's a recent photo. By recent, my terms are like from the last 10 years. What did he call this commission? Episodes in the Lives of Christ and St. Charles Borromeo. So again, that tells you Scalabrinian Church. I don't know much more than this. And there's a real question about dating here because he calls it 1918 to 1919. And long sub story, I'm not going to bore you with. I know that Buongiorno never came back to New York, never came back to the US. He went back to Italy in 1919. He traveled back and forth a few more times, but not past 1922. And just this afternoon, Jessica found a fabulous photo in an archive of this church, finished, built, open, no painting whatsoever, just solid white, every single surface from, guess what, 1924. So now I'm wondering, it's possible he completed paintings in Italy and had them shipped here and installed in this church without coming back himself. Which ones and where, I don't know. Now I'm wondering if, maybe he had to give up part of that commission because he couldn't finish it, because he couldn't come back. The most likely ones, in my opinion, see these round circles that have images in them in between these gigantic sculptures of angels. That would be my first vote for what he might have painted. And I can see in the image, 1, 2, 3, 5 or 6, at least on each side. And wouldn't that, divide nicely between Life of Christ and Life of St. Charles Borromeo? It's just a theory. I haven't seen any photos that are any closer up that I can even identify what they are. If somebody who's listening tonight can get those, can go take some for me or help me with this, oh, I would be so grateful. Okay, let me finish. Oh, quickly, I'm going to show you the church in New York that I'm most familiar with, which I thought, by the way, until recently was his largest commission. This one is 42 paintings, but some of them are kind of small. And, St. Leonard's, you might be able to give me a run for the money here. Yours might be bigger. But basically, these are in the apse around, sorry, I keep pointing to my screen. That doesn't work. These two photos at the top show you the apse around the altar, which is, what did he call these? Principal episodes in the life of Christ, St. Francis of Assisi, and St. Anthony of Padua. So again, hello, red flag, Franciscans. The two on the top show around the apse, which is obviously Life of Christ. There's a crucifixion and other images that, you probably all know. And in the bottom row, 6 of 8, because you already saw one before, he's got St. Francis on one side of one of the side aisles and then St. Anthony on the other side aisle. And somewhere is Anthony giving out bread here, by the way. Yeah, there it is. See lower right? There's Anthony feeding bread to the poor. So there's his version of that he did in the New York church. And also, by the way, good illustration again of his color palette, which to me, the color palette and the style of the figures, the way they're done, it's 19th century academic painting, it's called, in the art world. That's often the most telling thing about his work. Although, by the way, we also know in this church, he painted all the decorations as well. Like, see where there's a gold line in the architecture, or behind the altar, there's a beautiful, they call it a Roman cross pattern. That's all his work too. So he did architectural painting as well as figurative painting. And I'm almost done, and we're going to take questions. This is how you can contact me. And by the way, Claudia sent out what did we call it? Handout earlier today. And if you didn't get it, just let us know. Any of us could send it to you. That has all this stuff, how to contact me, websites that I have stuff at. This is my plug for 2 books that I wrote. The one on the right, that's a biography of my man. And the one on the left is the story of art in Most Precious Blood, not done by me, done by a committee of a group of us, several people. Oh man, so many people, including photographers. And we have a fabulous producer who have put that together. We're trying to get them published. If you guys know anybody, let us know. And this last thing is my pitch for, I also do genealogy work for hire. If you need any documents that are in New York City archives, I can go get them for you. That's it. I'm done. Thank you. Jessica, you want to take over the questions? How do we do this part?
Well, first, I want to just send you an applause because that was
Oh,
outstanding.
thank you.
I enjoyed it. We had a audience stay for the very end. About 40 people following us.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you all.
I'm really happy to see a lot of faces. Again, people I recognize. And I hope if you have time for questions.
Absolutely, I do. People can stand up.
Excellent. Because I just wanted to, I was kind of following along in the chat and adding some comments there.
Oh, cool.
One of them was just about St. Anthony, because the church below, this was a double-decker church. There was an earlier chapel dedicated to St. Anthony in the basement, right below, the church that we mainly saw in
You're talking about St. Leonard's?
No, yes, right. There was actually St. Leonard's below it is the shrine of St. Anthony, or was today.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that the subject matter of Anthony would be a reference to the presence of this shrine, which predates St. Leonard's. It was built and dedicated close to like 6 or 7 years before the upper church. So,
okay.
And Buongiorno worked on the church when it was, although we said at the beginning, the parish was set up in 1873, the actual building, the present building that you've been sharing in your slides, dates to the very end of the 19th century. So, Donatus Buongiorno worked on it about a decade or so later. They had some funding to do this. And I'm really struck by the fact that the newspaper articles published in the Herald and the Boston Pilot, those are two I've seen, in the year 1912 to kind of announce this work in course, talk about the complete color scheme that he had chosen for the church, meaning that this was a vision, again, the organic sort of, or complete idea.
He art directed. He art directed the whole thing.
Art direct. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
This was quite a show for him, and they gave him, this possibility to do this. So I really hope we can find some records like you shared of Sacred Heart. We have some raised hands, so let's go to Donna. Let me find her.
Hi. Hello.
You unmuted?
Yep. Yeah, I enjoyed this thoroughly. How many, my question is, a lot of the churches, were they all funded by Franciscans?
No, that's a really good question. Here's the tricky thing about the US. In Italy, churches are built by the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the US, churches are built by the parishes. And what we didn't go into, I'll just give you the quick flip, unpolitically correct explanation. Italian-American churches came about, Italian-American Roman Catholic churches came about in the US because Italians started showing up here in the 1870s, roughly, a few numbers, and then bigger in the 1880s and 90s. And they said, where's the Catholic Church? And everybody said, oh, down the road. And so they went to church on Sunday, and it was, St. Patrick's, or that's the biggest giveaway. They go to the church, and it's run completely by Irish who don't want to see them because, the Irish have been here long enough that they're starting to claw their way into the middle class and have decent jobs. And they don't want those, dirty Italians pulling them back down on the, hierarchy of immigrant treatment of people in the US. And they say, you know what, you guys can have the basement, have your Italian language mass down there. So, the Italians put up that for about 10 or 20 years until they had started to get a foothold themselves and raise their own money and build their own churches. And so the short story is, no, the order did not fund the church. They did not provide the money. They provided the priests who were, fully trained and knew how to hire an architect and all that stuff. but the parish raised the money to pay for it.
Mhm.
And I would like to, by the way, personally say thank you to every person in Boston who is descended from someone who helped build this church. You know why? Remember my explanation back at the beginning? Remember that manifest with those 4 men on a boat? 1907, including my grandfather who met his wife here. Therefore, I wouldn't exist if he never got here. Guess who bought his steamship ticket? Donatus Buongiorno. So you people are the reason I exist. Thank you. Honestly, it all comes around.
Thank you.
Serious. I'm not being flip. And that's true, that the way this all comes around in Italian American circles. By the way, another one of my hobby horses I'm going to jump on for just a second here. Anybody who wants to join me in this, please write to me or call me or whatever. Italians who ran businesses in the US, often invisibly, because they often worked in Italian, in their own Italian communities, and were kind of invisible to everybody else, such as my painter, by the way. You saw his contracts were in Italian. He was working with Italian-speaking priests. He ran a full, successful business in his little, tiny Italian ghetto of people who ran churches, you know? There were thousands and thousands of them in every little Italy in the US. I would like to see us start documenting and start celebrating some of them, whether it's the guy that ran the Salumeria or, you know, food and restaurants. Those are obvious ones, but there are lots of less obvious ones who were doing a good job and nobody knows about them. I've got another one. I figured out, we've got the contract for the, let me find the picture of it again. The church in Manhattan, the guy who provided that marble altar, his name was Domenico Borgia. Yes, like the famous Lucretia Borgia, not the same family. He was Sicilian. They were marble workers. I have tracked him just with the manifests alone, 8 men in the family who migrated to New York together and ran a marble business, providing 4 or 5 different kinds of finished marble products, including church altars to, guess who? Italian American Catholic churches. So again, he's in the same circles. And I'm even starting to suspect, by the way, he was enormously successful and wealthy, 10 times the level of this painter, Donatus Buongiorno. Who knows about him today? I've spoken to a couple of his descendants.
Of
You know what they
Borgia,
say?
you mean?
The Borgia descendants.
Oh,
They're not named Borgia. They're descendants of his daughters. They have other names. They're 2 or 3 surnames removed from Borgia. And to a one, they say, oh, you know, my grandmother had one of his drawings in the house, but I just don't know any more about him. And I'm thinking, I know why. You know why? Because he was Italian. I got news for you, family. Look, he was successful. This guy was a multimillionaire in the 1920s. He got married at St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue. I want to know more about him. And, you know, for every one of him, there are 4 or 5 other stories that are equally big, like the famous people that started macaroni factories that still have brand names, you know, like Ronzoni and names that we're still buying. There are 4 or 5 more like that. And there are hundreds that are 1/4 his size. And I want to see them all get documented. It's one of my new missions in life. Go ahead. Let's get
my goodness. We have a mission here, and you said it very beautifully. I do have a couple more questions. The next one, I'm doing it in order of how I received them, is going to be from Chip. Chip, I'm going to unmute you now. I'll go ahead.
It's nice to finally meet you, Janice.
Oh, hi, Chip.
Hi. I have a question. Have you checked with the Diocese of Boston? I know here in Cleveland, each pastor had to submit almost like an annual report to the from each church had to submit a report, and that
Yep.
sometimes will tell you what they were spending their money on.
Yep. No, I haven't. But I'm hoping maybe after tonight, one of the Boston people will help me do that. Yes, the priests were not, totally independent, unaudited contractors, so to speak. Yeah, they had to answer for their money. But they did have also quite a lot of, from what I can tell, agency in the process, especially over, I think, the aesthetics. And in this case, in the paintings, the subject matters. But yeah, there are some other paper trails. Thank you for that. And I'm gonna give you a shout out, Chip, to this crowd listening tonight. The way Chip and I met each other was online. He is descended from someone who is also from Solofra, that little town in Avellino. And we've been helping each other with some various genealogy work there. And I'm hoping I can persuade him to come with us the next time we
We're
go.
paisani. We're paisani.
Yeah.
Oh my
Do
goodness.
you know
that's
what
some-
happened? Do you know what
What?
happened with Donatus when he went back to Italy?
I do and I do not. There's one, I do know one story. And by the way, I'm going to point out one of my genealogy buddies threw in a comment here. Do you guys, Jessica, does everybody get a copy of this chat later? How do we capture that?
I'm still recording it. So
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to read some of the questions that have come into the chat. So hopefully we can, we'll have an audio record that'll be part of the recording.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. I'm going to point out part of the way of answering Chip's comment. A buddy of mine, Alec Ferretti, at 7:18 p.m., he put something in here. Alec is also a genealogist. And by the way, I'm going to call him a real one. He knows a lot more than I do. Call him, people, if you have questions. He pointed out that he has a lot more experience and a lot more training than I do in genealogy. There's a way, most of the US records that are available online at places like Ancestry and all the other online places stop around 1920. And this has to do with, the constant argument for give us money so we can scam things, right? It's not because they're still protected by privacy laws in most cases. And there's a workaround for that. You can file a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, with the USCIS, which is the current name of the agency that has all of our immigration related records. You can do it online, by the way, just Google it, you pay a fee, it's not huge, and they will copy anything they have in their documents and send it to you. Most of them are from the additional years of the 1920s. By the way, please try not to be horrified. It might take them years to answer you, but they do. I got a pile of papers one time, beautiful color Xeroxes of all the documents. I expected to get maybe a few more manifests for Buongiorno. Oh, was I wrong? What I got was a record, and I'm going to try and make this short. I got a record that he was stripped of his naturalized US citizenship after applying for a passport renewal from Naples in 1922. It was stripped for a reason that was then legitimate, which, by the way, I can't believe he didn't know it. I'm wondering if he was just sort of like pushing the limits and thinking he might slide by somehow. The reason was there was a law in the books that if you resided for more than 2 years consecutively in your original nation of birth, you could lose your naturalized US citizenship. It was one of the lesser known, but believe me, gazillion laws on the books that the US passed in the 1920s to basically harass immigrants. Hello, 100 years later, does that pattern sound familiar to anyone? Don't get me started. But anyway, he lost his citizenship, and that's why he never came back, because in 1924, you guys have probably heard of another law was passed called the quota system, which basically closed the door to non-citizens from Italy and 4 or 5 other Southern European countries. But anyway, Alex is pointing out, if you're researching somebody and those 1920s are critical, file one of those requests. You will eventually get it in the mail, and you might be surprised and or shocked at what you learn. That said, oh my gosh, I forgot what the question was, why I brought that up. Jessica, can you help me?
No, of course. I think that it was just a follow-up for Chip's original question.
Oh,
We
yes.
also talked about stained glass. I'm not sure. We didn't actually talk about that tonight. And I am still unclear as to whether or not stained glass was included in this St. Leonard's.
It's another great question that is still one of my questions.
We need to research that further.
Yeah, here's what I think. No, Buongiorno was not a stained glass maker. He did not make stained glass windows and install them. I suspect, though, that he did designs for them, because in the church in New York, we have a painting that he did that was like a proposal, like a mock-up for a stained glass window that never got built because they changed some of the architecture at the last minute and they didn't put a window in. And therefore, we still have this painting in that spot. And I also wonder, so that's one indicator I have that he might have tried to like art direct stained glass. I also wonder if there might be some windows that are actually his oil painting on glass. Although other people have told me, no, that's impossible. They would never last 100 years. It's a big question for me. And if there's anybody in the audience that knows about stained glass and how to research it, please contact me.
Oh my goodness. Boston was a great center for stained glass production at the time. So
really,
we definitely will have.
Okay, we got to talk, because I've been told that it was all imported and it was all German.
Oh my goodness! Wow, we held our own, I think, especially.
Okay, good to hear it. Glad to hear it.
I just want to follow up with a couple of questions and comments. Emily DiPaolo said that in the pictures you showed with Pope Francis, I recognize Father Antonio Riccio. So it's not one of Buongiorno's, not one of his works, but I guess a picture of the Franciscans from Most Precious Blood. And of course, you're going to include, it was.
Hang on, I'm looking for it.
Yes. So there he is. Yeah. So these are contemporary Franciscans, it sounds like.
Yes.
And Father Fabian, Grifone, some of them are now sadly deceased. And then let's see, another comment, Kiki said, trying to find out about the 19th century Italo-American community and who worked on Newport, Rhode Island mansions, marble plaster. And that's a great point, because city directories for Boston, just because that's the area I'm most familiar with, lists trades of Boston residents. And a lot of the Italians, in fact, are figural painters, doing, as you pointed out, the fancy work for a lot of these, the specialized sort of Mannerist style so popular in the later half of the 19th century. Marble workers, capable for working in metal, and these are the people in the cities. Plus, there were a lot of quarries in business at the time that did sculpture, not just funerary, but also monumental. And the Yankees, native, whatever, Anglo-Americans, if you will, the artists like Sargent and others did in fact collaborate with Italian artisans on a lot of the execution, the actual carrying out of these commissions. So definitely.
Yeah. Tiki, we need to talk. You write to me. call me tomorrow or whatever. Yeah, what Kiki's talking about, I'm going to add to, she's talking about Newport, Rhode Island mansions. We all know those like turn of the century, gigantic houses that wealthy people built, right? They also built them all over the North Shore of Long Island. And someplace, I forget which of the two places it was, they were ironically called cottages. Yeah, no kidding. Who built all the marble work in those houses? And by the way, the Borgia guy that I was telling you about that built the altar at Most Precious Blood, I have found records, I have found ads by him. He built at least one interior, very, very fancy marble staircase that I know of in an office building in Manhattan, circa 1900. It was a style, you know, at the time, turn of the century. There were some buildings that were built that way to look like either old Rome or old Italy or old whatever. There were a lot of people employed making that stuff. Let's start celebrating them. Let's find out about them and let's publish books about them.
All right. Are there other questions that people would like to raise now? Keeping in mind that Janice has supplied her contact information, and it sounds like you welcome follow-ups.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
How many people were here? Some 40 something. I would like to hear from every one of you. Absolutely.
It's a great pleasure to have this. I just want to add that this presentation is brought to you by the St. Leonard's 150th Anniversary Committee. I'm a member. And St. Leonard's Church in the North End of Boston, as I said, marks its 150th this year, and is a member of the Immaculate Conception Province, who, along with Italian immigrants, created this spectacular church. We invite you, all of you, Janice, royal welcome, to come, to learn about our amazing church history and participate in the many of our upcoming events. I hope we have more Zooms, because it sounds like we've cast our net so wide with this to welcome people from all over the US. I know it's kind of hard to do the time difference in Italy. It's about 3 a.m. there. But this will be recorded, and please do consider participating in upcoming events. And they are all listed at World Wide Web St. Leonard Church, Boston.org, or you can get in touch with us at celebrating 150 years at stleonards.org. I want to just add this information because we're not done yet after tonight. And I just, as I promised in the chat, we'll go right over to St. Lazarus and see if we can uncover these, keeping in mind, though, that some of these commissions were by nature temporary. They were made for special festivities. They were portable objects, and they may be out there, but they're not necessarily in the place in one of these churches today. So keep an eye out on eBay.
Yeah.
Thank you again. On behalf of all of us, and I know a lot of people listening tonight will continue the conversation with you, as I will as well.
Fabulous. Thank you all. It's been
Thank
fun.
you.
All right, we will
Thank you
end.
so
Take
much.
care. Take care.
Bye.